I'm Kyle, 32, a software engineer who just moved back to my hometown after years away on the West Coast. 3 years ago, my grandparents left me their house in their will, and I've poured my heart, soul, and savings into renovating it. Last week, I returned from a business trip to find my parents and sister Amanda waiting in my living room with news that shattered my world. The betrayal I never saw coming would test everything I thought I knew about family. Before I tell you how I lost everything I worked for, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family stab you in the back. Growing up, I always knew where I stood in my family's hierarchy. My sister Amanda, 2 years younger, was the golden child who could do no wrong. My parents, Robert and Susan, made it clear through their actions that she was the favorite. They attended every one of her school events, but conveniently had conflicts during mine. When I brought home straight as they'd nod and say good job before quickly turning the conversation to Amanda's B+ in art class and how creative she was. My grandparents were different. Dad's parents, Frank and Elaine, lived just 3 blocks from our house in a modest 2-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood. They became my refuge when things got tough at home. Grandpa Frank was a retired electrician who taught me how to use tools before I could properly tie my shoes. Grandma Elaine had been a bookkeeper, and she instilled in me a love for mathematics and puzzles that eventually led to my career in software engineering. Hard work and integrity, Grandpa would say, are the only things no one can take from you. He'd pick me up every Saturday morning when I was 10 years old, and we'd go to the hardware store. Then we'd return to their house to work on whatever project he had planned. While Amanda was getting new clothes and toys, I was learning how to install ceiling fans and fix leaky pipes. At the time, I sometimes felt jealous of my sister's seemingly easier path, but now I'm grateful for the skills my grandfather passed down. When I was 12, my parents forgot my school science fair. I'd spent weeks building a working model of a hydroelectric dam that Grandpa had helped me design. My project won first place, but there was no one from my immediate family there to see it. Grandma and Grandpa showed up, though, beaming with pride. Later that night, I overheard my mother on the phone with a friend. Amanda has a cold, so we couldn't possibly leave her to go to Kyle's little project thing. The cold hadn't stopped them from taking her shopping that weekend. These patterns continued throughout my teenage years. When I turned 16, my parents gave me their old car with 200,000 miles on it and told me I should be grateful. When Amanda turned 16 6 months later, they bought her a brand new compact car. "Your sister needs something reliable," Dad explained when I questioned the disparity. "You're good with your hands. You can fix your car if anything happens." Grandma and Grandpa helped me apply for college scholarships. My parents seemed surprised when I got accepted to a good engineering program with almost a full ride. "We always figured you'd go to community college," Mom said at my high school graduation party. Meanwhile, they'd been saving for Amanda's education since she was born. I worked hard through college, taking summer jobs and internships, while Amanda dropped out after her sophomore year to find herself. Despite this, my parents continued to financially support her lifestyle, paying for her apartment and giving her a monthly allowance well into her 20s. After college, I landed a job at a tech company on the West Coast and moved away from my hometown. The distance helped heal some of the pain from my childhood. I visited my grandparents regularly, flying back at least once every 2 months. During these visits, I would stay with them, largely avoiding my parents and Amanda, except for obligatory holiday gatherings. When I was 29, Grandpa Frank passed away suddenly from a heart attack. Grandma Elaine followed just 6 months later. The doctors called it heart failure, but everyone knew it was heartbreak. They had been married for 54 years. Their passing hit me hard. They had been my real parents in all the ways that mattered. At the reading of their will, everyone was surprised except me when they left their house to me. To our grandson Kyle, who spent countless hours helping maintain and improve our home, we leave the house and property at 823 Maple Street. We know you'll cherish it as we have. My parents were visibly upset. Mom and Dad should have split things evenly between the grandchildren, my father complained loudly at the lawyer's office. Amanda sat smugly beside them, as though she deserved half simply for existing. The lawyer, an old friend of my grandparents named Jackson Pierce, simply stated that Frank and Elaine's wishes were clear and legally binding. Over the next 3 years, I spent almost every vacation and long weekend flying back to work on the house. I modernized the electrical system that Grandpa had taught me about, installed new plumbing, refinished the original hardwood floors and painted every wall. I converted the basement into a home office where I could work remotely. All told, I put about $70,000 of my own money into renovations, not counting the countless hours of labor. 6 months ago, an opportunity arose at my company to head up a new division in my hometown. It felt like fate. I could move back into my grandparents' house permanently and honor their legacy by living in the home they had built their lives in. I accepted the position, relocated, and settled into a routine that made me happier than I'd been in years. My parents and Amanda had been oddly interested in my renovations, stopping by unannounced to see what I was doing with the place. I noticed Amanda taking pictures of the improvements, which struck me as strange, but I dismissed it as simple curiosity. Now I understand she was documenting everything for a very different reason. Last Tuesday, I returned from a 3-day business trip to Chicago. The quarterly meeting had gone well, and I'd secured additional funding for my division's projects. I was exhausted from travel but satisfied with the results, and looking forward to sleeping in my own bed. The flight had been delayed, so it was nearly 9 in the evening when my Uber dropped me off. As the car pulled away, I noticed my parents' silver SUV parked in my driveway alongside Amanda's blue compact car. I hadn't told them when I'd be back, so their presence was unexpected. For a brief, naive moment, I thought perhaps they had planned a welcome-home surprise. I shouldered my laptop bag and rolled my suitcase up the walkway, noticing that all the lights were on inside. I had definitely turned everything off before leaving. Using my key, I entered through the front door to find my mother, father, and sister sitting stiffly in my living room. The atmosphere was tense, like a board meeting before announcing layoffs. "There you are," my mother said, without getting up or offering a greeting. Her voice had that falsely sweet tone she used when she was about to do something underhanded. "We've been waiting for over an hour." "Sorry, the flight was delayed," I replied automatically, setting down my bags. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" My father cleared his throat and straightened the collar of his polo shirt, a nervous habit he'd had for as long as I could remember. "Son, we need to have a family discussion." Before I could respond, my mother cut in, her voice suddenly cold and businesslike. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. This house belongs to your sister now." I stood there still in my travel clothes, trying to process what I'd just heard. "What are you talking about? This is my house. Grandpa and Grandma left it to me in their will." My father produced a manila envelope from beside him on the couch and extracted several official-looking papers. "We've discovered some new information. Your grandparents had verbally promised this house to Amanda before they passed. They just never updated their will." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That's absolutely not true. Grandpa and Grandma wanted me to have this house. They knew I loved it and would take care of it. Amanda spoke up, then her voice dripping with the entitlement she'd cultivated since childhood. "They obviously made a mistake, Kyle. You have your fancy career and can buy any house you want. I'm starting a family and need the space." It was the first I'd heard of Amanda starting a family, but I didn't have time to process that information because my mother jumped back in. "Your sister is pregnant, Kyle. She and Thomas need a stable home for their baby, and this neighborhood has excellent schools. So buy her a house." I replied, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You've given her everything else she's ever wanted." My father stood up, puffing out his chest. "Don't take that tone. We're doing what's best for the family. Amanda needs this house more than you do." "It's my house," I said firmly. "Legally, I have the deed and the will to prove it." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "We found a letter from your grandmother. She clearly stated their intention to give the house to Amanda." "Let me see this letter," I demanded, holding out my hand. My parents exchanged glances. "We don't have it with us," my mother said quickly. "It's being verified by our lawyer." Even in my shocked state, I knew this was a lie. If such a letter existed, they would have brought it. My father handed me a document instead. "This is a quit-claim deed," he explained. "Just sign it and we can make this transition smooth. Amanda and Thomas can move in by the weekend." I glanced at the paper, which would indeed transfer ownership of my house to Amanda if I signed it. The audacity was breathtaking. I looked up to see Amanda walking around my living room, pointing at various spots. The nursery would look great in that small bedroom upstairs, she said to no one in particular, and we'll need to replace these floors with something more child-friendly. The floors I had spent weeks refinishing by hand using techniques Grandpa had taught me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them all out of my house. I wanted to remind them how they had always favored Amanda, how Grandpa and Grandma had been more parents to me than they ever were, how I had poured my heart and savings into this house while they had done nothing but criticize and interfere. But something inside me went very still and quiet. A lifetime of dealing with their manipulation had taught me that emotional outbursts only gave them ammunition. Instead, I folded the unsigned document and placed it on the coffee table. I need time to think about this, I said evenly. My silence seemed to unnerve them. They had expected yelling, possibly tears, definitely a fight they could use to paint me as unreasonable. My mother recovered first. There's nothing to think about, she snapped. 48 hours, Kyle. We'll be back Thursday evening with a moving truck. Either you'll be gone or we'll pack your things for you. They stood to leave, Amanda pausing to take one more photo of my newly renovated kitchen. The cabinets will have to go, she said loud enough for me to hear. Too dark for my taste. As they walked to the door, my father turned back. Be reasonable, son. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Then they were gone, leaving me standing alone in the home my grandparents had entrusted to me, now threatened by the very people who should have respected their wishes. I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. The quiet house that had always brought me comfort now felt vulnerable, as if the walls themselves were under attack. I sat there for a long time, processing the betrayal and deciding how to respond. One thing was certain: I would not be leaving my home in 48 hours or ever. Not like this. Not because of their lies. After about an hour of sitting in stunned silence, my training as an engineer kicked in. When faced with a complex problem, break it down into smaller, manageable parts. Define the parameters. Identify potential solutions. I needed information and allies. I called my law school friend Brian at 9:45, hoping he'd still be awake. Brian Hoffman and I had been roommates in college before he went on to law school while I pursued engineering. We'd stayed close over the years, meeting up whenever I visited town. Kyle, he answered, sounding surprised. Everything okay? It's kind of late. I need legal advice, I said, then proceeded to explain the situation in detail. Brian's response was immediate and reassuring. First off, don't sign anything. Not one damn thing. Second, they can't just take your house because they say so. That's not how property law works. They mentioned some letter from my grandmother, I said. Even if such a letter exists, which I doubt, it wouldn't override a properly executed will, Brian explained. Verbal promises about real estate aren't legally binding in most states, including ours. That's why we have the statute of frauds. He promised to come over first thing in the morning to review my documentation and develop a strategy. In the meantime, gather every piece of paper related to the house. The will, the deed, tax records, renovation, receipts, utility bills, everything. After hanging up, I pulled out my laptop and began researching property laws in our state. Brian was right. Verbal promises regarding real estate weren't legally enforceable. Furthermore, any challenge to the will would have had to be filed within 6 months of probate, which had long passed. I spent the night organizing documents and creating a timeline of events since my grandparents' passing. By morning, I had 2 folders ready, one with legal documents establishing my ownership and another with evidence of my renovations and continuous residence. Brian arrived at 8:30 sharp, dressed in a suit despite it being Saturday. He reviewed my documentation with the critical eye of a seasoned attorney. This is all in order, he confirmed. Your grandparents' will was properly executed, witnessed, and notarized. The property was legally transferred to you. You've been paying the property taxes. There's no legitimate claim they could make. So what are they trying to pull? I asked. My guess. They're hoping to intimidate you into giving up the house, Brian said. Family pressure can be powerful, and they know which buttons to push. We decided our next step should be to contact Jackson Pierce, my grandparents' attorney who had handled the will. His office was closed for the weekend, but Brian knew him personally and managed to get his cell number. Jackson agreed to meet us for coffee that afternoon. The elderly attorney remembered me immediately, his weathered face breaking into a smile as we shook hands. "Kyle, good to see you. Though I wish it were under better circumstances," he said after Brian explained why we needed to meet urgently. "Mr. Pierce, my parents claim my grandparents intended to leave the house to my sister. Is there any truth to that?" I asked directly. Jackson's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Absolutely not. Your grandparents were very clear about their wishes. They specifically told me they wanted you to have the house because of the special bond you shared and the interest you showed in maintaining it." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What I didn't mention at the will reading to spare feelings was that your parents actually tried to contest the will after your grandparents passed. This was news to me." "They did?" "Yes," Jackson nodded. "They claimed your grandparents weren't of sound mind when they made their will, but I had plenty of evidence to the contrary, including medical evaluations." The judge dismissed their challenge immediately. This revelation changed everything. My parents weren't just making an impulsive grab for the house now. They had been planning this for years, waiting for a better opportunity after their legal challenge failed. Armed with this information, we visited the county records office to verify that the deed was properly recorded in my name. The clerk confirmed that I was the sole legal owner of the property at 823 Maple Street. While we're here, Brian suggested let's check if anyone has filed any new documents related to your property recently. The search revealed something disturbing. 2 weeks ago, someone had requested copies of all records related to my property. The clerk couldn't tell us who, but the timing aligned perfectly with my parents' sudden claim. Our next stop was my house, where Brian suggested we do a thorough inspection for any signs of tampering or unauthorized entry. In the kitchen, I noticed the spare key that I kept in a drawer was missing. I distinctly remembered putting it there before my business trip. "They have a key to your house," Brian stated the obvious. "We need to change the locks immediately." While waiting for the locksmith, we continued our investigation. I checked my mail and found several utility bills addressed to Amanda Wilson at my address. Somehow my sister had added her name to some of my utilities, likely to establish a paper trail suggesting she lived there. "This is getting serious," Brian said, examining the bills. "They're creating false evidence of Amanda's connection to the property." The locksmith arrived and changed all the exterior locks. As he worked, I called my company's IT department and arranged for the installation of a security system with cameras covering all entrances. Being a senior manager had its perks, and they agreed to expedite the installation for that afternoon. While we waited, Brian and I discussed possible motivations. Why now, I wondered aloud. They've had 3 years to try this. "Your renovations," Brian suggested. "You've substantially increased the property value, and if Amanda really is pregnant, they might see it as a perfect emotional leverage point." I pulled up the county tax assessor's website on my laptop. The most recent valuation of my property was nearly double what it had been when my grandparents passed away, thanks to my improvements and the rising market. They don't want this house for Amanda to raise a family, I realized. They want to sell it. Further digging into family history provided another piece of the puzzle. My mother had always been jealous of the close relationship I had with her in-laws. There had been tension between them for years, with my grandparents occasionally criticizing my parents' favoritism toward Amanda. I also discovered through old bank statements I found in Grandpa's desk in the basement that my parents had borrowed $30,000 from my grandparents 15 years ago. The loan had never been repaid. Perhaps they viewed taking the house as compensation they were owed. By evening, my house was secured with new locks and a state-of-the-art security system. Brian and I had compiled enough evidence to definitively establish my legal ownership and expose my family's deceptive tactics. "You're in a strong position legally," Brian assured me, "but be prepared for emotional warfare. They'll try to paint you as the villain, especially to extended family." As if on cue, my phone rang. It was my cousin Patrick, my father's brother's son. "Kyle, what's going on? Your mom just called my mom saying you're trying to make Amanda and her baby homeless. That doesn't sound like you." The disinformation campaign had begun. After explaining the truth to Patrick, who was sympathetic and promised to set the record straight with other relatives, I called my friend Michael. Unlike Brian, who was providing legal guidance, Michael had known me since childhood and understood the family dynamics at play. "They're really trying to steal your house?" Michael asked incredulously after I filled him in. "That's low even for your parents." "I need someone to talk this through with," I admitted. "Someone who gets the emotional side of all this." We met at a 24-hour diner, the kind with sticky laminate tables and bottomless coffee. For the next 3 hours, I poured out my frustrations, fears, and the lifetime of slights that had culminated in this ultimate betrayal. "I always knew they favored Amanda," I said, stirring my 4th cup of coffee. "But I never thought they'd go this far." Michael listened without interruption, then offered his perspective. "This isn't really about the house, Kyle. It's about control. You've built a successful life independent of them. The house is a symbol of that independence, and they want to take it away." His insight resonated. My parents had always expected me to fail without their support, proving their favoritism was justified. Instead, I had thrived largely thanks to my grandparents' influence. "So what's your game plan?" Michael asked. "I'm not giving up the house," I stated firmly. "But I need to be smart about how I handle this. They expect me to explode, to act irrationally, giving them ammunition to paint me as unstable or unreasonable." "The gray rock method," Michael suggested. "Be as responsive as a gray rock. Don't give them any emotion to feed on." The next morning, armed with legal knowledge and emotional clarity, I met with Brian to develop a comprehensive strategy. We set up shop at my dining room table, spreading out documents and laptops. "First, we need to document everything Brian said. Every interaction, every threat, every attempt to access the property." I showed him the security camera app on my phone, which provided live feeds of all entrances to my house and saved footage to cloud storage, already on it. "Good. Next, we need to prepare for their return tomorrow evening. I'll be here as a witness, but we should have backup." We decided to invite Michael and his wife Stephanie to be present as additional witnesses. Brian would bring a paralegal from his firm to document the encounter. "Now let's prepare for various scenarios," Brian continued. "If they bring a moving truck as threatened, we'll need to be clear about trespassing laws. If they try to force entry, we'll call the police immediately." We drafted a formal cease and desist letter outlining the legal facts of my ownership and warning against further harassment or attempts to gain unauthorized access to the property. Brian would deliver it personally if they showed up as promised. Next, we tackled the family disinformation campaign. I wrote a clear, factual email to send to extended family members, explaining the situation without emotional language and attaching copies of relevant legal documents proving my ownership. "What about Amanda?" I asked. "She's being manipulated too, in a way." Brian considered this. "You could try reaching out to her separately, but be careful. Any communication could be twisted or used against you." I decided to text Thomas, Amanda's husband, instead. We weren't close, but he had always seemed level-headed. "Can we talk privately? It's about the house situation." To my surprise, he responded almost immediately, suggesting we meet for lunch. Brian advised me to go but record the conversation legal in our state with one-party consent and not make any promises or admissions. Thomas looked uncomfortable as we sat in a quiet corner of a local sandwich shop. "I want you to know," he began, "that I didn't know anything about this plan until yesterday. Amanda told me your parents discovered some letter proving the house was meant for her." "No such letter exists," I said calmly. "My grandparents left the house to me in their legally executed will. My parents already tried to contest it once and failed." Thomas looked shocked. "Amanda didn't mention that part. She said you were being selfish and refusing to help family." "I've helped Amanda plenty over the years," I replied. "But this house means everything to me. It's not just property, it's my connection to my grandparents." As our conversation continued, Thomas revealed more disturbing information. My parents had promised to help them with a down payment on a house months ago, then suddenly withdrawn the offer, telling them they could have my house instead. "They've been planning this for weeks," Thomas admitted. "Amanda's been picking out furniture, planning renovations. Your mom even gave her color swatches for the nursery." "And you were okay with taking my house?" I asked. Thomas had the decency to look ashamed. "I questioned it, but Amanda and your parents insisted it was what your grandparents would have wanted. that you were only named in the will because of some clerical error. By the end of our lunch, Thomas was clearly having doubts about the entire scheme. "I need to talk to Amanda," he said. "This doesn't feel right." Back at my house, Brian was impressed with the information I'd gathered. Thomas could be a valuable ally, he noted. Or at least he might convince Amanda to back down. We spent the rest of the day finalizing our preparations. I moved some boxes to the front porch to create the illusion I might be complying with their demands, a suggestion from Michael to give my parents a false sense of security. That evening, my parents called to check on my progress. "I'm handling things," I said vaguely, following our strategy of providing minimal information. "Good," my mother replied, sounding smug. "Amanda and Thomas will bring the truck tomorrow at 6. We expect you to be completely moved out by then." "I understand you'll be here at 6, I replied, neither confirming nor denying my intention to comply. After hanging up, I checked the security cameras one last time before going to bed. To my shock, I saw movement at the back door. Zooming in, I recognized my mother trying to use a key in the newly changed lock. The camera's microphone picked up her frustrated voice. "It's not working. He must have changed the locks." My father's voice responded, "We'll deal with it tomorrow. He can't keep us out of Amanda's house for long." I saved the footage immediately and sent it to Brian. His response was swift, documented, attempted, unauthorized entry. "This strengthens our position." That night I barely slept, thinking about the confrontation to come. But unlike the shock and helplessness I'd felt when they first made their demand, I now felt prepared and resolute. My grandparents had taught me to stand up for what was right, and tomorrow I would honor that lesson. At exactly 24 hours into the 48-hour ultimatum, my cell phone rang. It was my mother, her voice artificially sweet. "Kyle, honey, I'm just checking on how the packing is going. Do you need any help?" "I'm handling things my way," I replied, deliberately vague. "Well, don't forget we'll be there tomorrow evening. Amanda is so excited to start setting up the nursery." I made a non-committal sound and ended the call quickly. 20 minutes later, my father called with essentially the same message, though his approach was more businesslike. "Son, I trust you're being reasonable about this. The sooner you accept the situation, the easier this transition will be for everyone." Again, I gave no concrete information about my intentions, simply acknowledging that I heard what he was saying. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Amanda standing on my porch, holding what appeared to be paint samples, and accompanied by a man in work clothes. I opened the door but remained in the doorway, blocking entry. "What do you need, Amanda?" I asked politely but firmly. "I'm here to show the contractor what needs to be done," she said, attempting to step past me into the house. "The nursery needs to be painted before we move in, and the kitchen needs updating." "I'm sorry, but you can't come in," I said, standing my ground. "This is my house, and I haven't authorized any renovations." Amanda's face flushed with anger. "Don't be difficult, Kyle. Mom and Dad already told you the situation. This is my house now, and I need to get things ready for the baby. The legal owner of this house is me," I stated calmly. "I have documentation to prove it. Unless you have a court order or my written permission, you have no right to enter or make any changes." The contractor looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Maybe I should come back another time," he suggested. "There won't be another time," I informed him. "No renovations have been authorized by the homeowner, which is me." Amanda's face contorted with rage. "You've always been selfish. I'm pregnant, Kyle. I need this house for my family." "Your pregnancy doesn't entitle you to my property," I replied, maintaining my composure. "If you need a house, I suggest you and our parents look into buying one just like most people do." She pulled out her phone and dialed rapidly. "Mom, Kyle won't let me in to show the contractor the renovations we need." I could hear my mother's shrill voice through the speaker, though not her exact words. Amanda thrust the phone toward me. "She wants to talk to you." Taking the phone, I heard my mother mid-sentence. "Absolutely unacceptable behavior. Let your sister in right now." "No," I said simply. "Amanda does not have permission to enter my house or make any changes to it." "We'll call the police," she threatened. "Feel free," I replied calmly. "When they arrive, I'll show them my deed will and property tax receipts proving my ownership. What documentation will you show them?" There was a pause then. "This is your final warning, Kyle. Don't make this ugly. You're the ones attempting to take property that legally belongs to me," I pointed out. "I'd say that's already ugly." After ending the call, I handed the phone back to a fuming Amanda. The contractor had already retreated to his truck, clearly wanting no part of a family dispute. "You'll regret this," Amanda spat as she stormed back to her car. "Just wait until everyone hears how you're treating your pregnant sister." As predicted, the family phone tree lit up within the hour. Aunts, uncles, and cousins called with varying degrees of concern and accusation. To each, I calmly explained the legal reality and offered to email documentation proving my ownership. Some were supportive after hearing my side, while others remained firmly in my parents' camp, regardless of facts. The most surprising call came from my father's brother, Uncle Steve. "Your dad told me you're refusing to honor your grandparents' wishes," he began. "Actually, I'm doing exactly what Grandpa and Grandma wanted," I explained. "They left me the house in their will because we spent years working on it together. Dad and Mom tried to contest the will right after they died but lost because there was no legal basis for their claim." What Uncle Steve sounded genuinely shocked. Jim never mentioned contesting the will. He told everyone, "You had agreed to let Amanda have the house but suddenly changed your mind." "That's completely false," I assured him. "I've invested thousands of dollars and countless hours renovating this house. It's my home, and I have no intention of giving it away." Uncle Steve promised to speak with my father and get to the bottom of things. "I love my brother, but he's never been good at admitting when he's wrong," he sighed. Late that afternoon, I received a text from Thomas. "We need to talk. Can I come by?" After consulting with Brian, I agreed to meet Thomas, but insisted we talk on the front porch rather than inside the house. When he arrived, he looked stressed and conflicted. "Amanda's furious about earlier," he began. "She's been crying all afternoon saying you're trying to hurt the baby by denying us the house." "That's emotional manipulation," I pointed out. "My keeping my own property has nothing to do with your baby's well-being." Thomas nodded slowly. "I know. And after our talk yesterday, I did some research. You're right about the legal stuff. The house is yours fair and square." "Have you discussed this with Amanda?" I asked. "I tried," he said, looking down at his hands. "She won't listen. She says her parents promised her the house, and she believes them completely. But something doesn't add up. They've been acting strange for weeks, ever since they found out about the pregnancy." "What do you mean strange?" I prompted. "Secretive. Having whispered conversations that stop when I enter the room. Your mom took Amanda shopping for furniture for this house 2 weeks ago, before they even confronted you." This confirmed my suspicion that this had been a coordinated plan, not a spontaneous decision based on Amanda's pregnancy. "There's something else," Thomas added hesitantly. "I overheard your parents discussing selling the house once it was in Amanda's name. They mentioned using the money to pay off some debt and giving us a portion for a down payment on a different house." The pieces were falling into place. My parents never intended for Amanda to live in the house. They wanted to sell it and use the proceeds themselves, offering Amanda and Thomas just enough to keep them complicit in the scheme. "You should know," I told Thomas, "that I'm not moving out tomorrow or ever. I have legal representation and documentation of my ownership. If they show up with a moving truck, they'll be met with a formal cease and desist letter and witnesses." Thomas looked relieved rather than upset. "Honestly, I've been uncomfortable with this whole thing from the start. It never felt right to take your house." As he was leaving, he turned back. "I'll try to talk sense into Amanda again, but she's completely under your parents' influence right now. If they do something crazy tomorrow, remember, she's pregnant. Please don't do anything that might cause her stress." "I have no intention of creating drama," I assured him. "I just want to protect what's legally mine." After Thomas left, I checked the security cameras again and noticed a car slowly driving by the house. Zooming in, I recognized my parents' silver SUV. They were surveilling the property, perhaps looking for signs that I was indeed packing up as ordered. I called Brian to update him on the latest developments. They're escalating, he agreed. The drive-by, the attempted contractor visit, the family pressure campaign. All classic intimidation tactics. Will they really try to force their way in tomorrow? I wondered aloud. Be prepared for anything, Brian advised. But with the documentation we have and the witnesses we've arranged, they'd be foolish to try anything beyond bluffing and emotional manipulation. That night around 9:30, my security system alerted me to movement at the back door. Checking the camera feed, I saw my father attempting to use a key in the lock, just as my mother had the night before. When it didn't work, he tried the windows, checking if any were unlocked. I saved this footage as well, adding it to our growing file of evidence. It was clear now that my parents had no intention of respecting my legal rights. They were willing to enter my home without permission, potentially even breaking in, if necessary. As I watched my father retreat to his car where my mother waited, I felt a strange calm. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, but thanks to the careful preparation and the truth being on my side, I was ready. The 48-hour deadline arrived. I spent the morning reviewing our strategy with Brian and ensuring all our documentation was in order. Michael and Stephanie arrived around 5, bringing sandwiches and moral support. Brian's paralegal Jessica set up her laptop on the dining room table, ready to transcribe everything that would transpire. At 5:55, the security cameras showed a rental moving truck pulling into my driveway, followed by my parents' SUV and Amanda's car. Thomas was driving the truck, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Here we go," I said to the room. "Everyone remember the plan. Stay calm, stick to facts, record everything." We positioned ourselves strategically. Brian and I would meet them at the door. Michael and Stephanie would remain in the living room as witnesses, while Jessica would stay out of sight in the dining room documenting everything. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. I took a deep breath and opened the door with Brian at my side. My mother's smug expression faltered slightly when she saw Brian in his professional suit. My father looked irritated while Amanda stood slightly behind them, one hand protectively over her stomach. Thomas remained by the truck, not approaching the house. "Who's this?" my father demanded, gesturing at Brian. "Brian Hoffman, attorney at law." Brian introduced himself. "I represent Kyle in this matter." My mother's eyes narrowed. "We don't need lawyers for a family matter. Kyle knows what he needs to do." "Indeed I do," I replied calmly, "and that's to protect my legal property from unauthorized attempts to take it." Brian held out a folder containing the cease and desist letter we had prepared. "This formal notice informs you that any attempts to enter, occupy, or remove Kyle from his legally owned property will be considered trespassing and harassment, potentially resulting in legal action." My father refused to take the folder, so Brian simply held it, continuing. "Additionally, we have documented multiple unauthorized attempts to access the property over the past 48 hours, including attempts to use keys without the CANA, homeowner's permission, and bringing contractors to the property without authorization." "What are you talking about?" my mother sputtered. "We have every right to prepare Amanda's house for her." "This is not Amanda's house," I stated firmly. "It is my house left to me by my grandparents in their legally executed and probated will. I have lived here and invested substantial time and money in renovations. I have paid all taxes and utilities. There is no legal basis for your claim." "We told you about the letter," my father insisted. "The letter that you conveniently don't have with you. The letter that somehow overrides a legal will that your own attempt to contest was dismissed by the court," I challenged. My father's face reddened. "Who told you about that?" "Jackson Pierce, Grandpa, and Grandma's attorney," I replied. "He remembered quite clearly how you tried to claim they weren't of sound mind when they made their will." The judge disagreed. Amanda stepped forward, her face a mixture of confusion and anger. "What are they talking about, Dad? You said there was no question about the house being meant for me." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Kyle's trying to confuse the issue. The point is, you need this house for your family, and he's being selfish." "Actually," Thomas called from near the truck, finally approaching the porch, "we need to talk about this, Amanda. I've been doing some research, and Kyle's right about the legal ownership." "Thomas," Amanda hissed. "We discussed this. Mom and Dad are handling it." Thomas shook his head. They're handling it by trying to take something that doesn't belong to us. That's not right, especially not for our child. Is that the example we want to set? My mother's strategy shifted instantly. Her expression softened, and her voice took on a wounded tone. Kyle, sweetie, I know you loved your grandparents. We all did. But family has to look out for each other. Amanda is having a baby, your niece or nephew. Don't you want them to have a good home? I absolutely want that, I agreed, and I would have been happy to help Amanda and Thomas find a home if anyone had asked. Instead, you tried to take mine through lies and manipulation. We did no such thing, my mother exclaimed, clutching her chest dramatically. You're breaking my heart with these accusations. We have security footage, Brian interjected, of both of you attempting to enter the property without permission on multiple occasions in the past 48 hours. We also have documentation of Amanda's name being fraudulently added to utility accounts to create a false impression of residency. Amanda's eyes widened. Mom, is that true? My mother avoided the question. Everything we've done has been for you, Amanda, to secure your future. My father, seeing the situation deteriorating, attempted to reassert control. He stepped closer to me, using his height to try to intimidate me as he had when I was younger. Listen here, boy. You've always been difficult, always thinking you're better than everyone with your fancy job and education. But this is about family, and you're either with us or against us. I stood my ground, no longer the child who could be bullied. This is indeed about family. It's about honoring Grandpa and Grandma's wishes and the legacy they entrusted to me. It's about respecting legal rights and not trying to steal property through emotional manipulation. The confrontation had drawn attention. Several neighbors had emerged from their homes, watching the scene unfold from their yards. Mrs. Rivera from next door approached cautiously. Is everything all right, Kyle? She asked. Do you need me to call someone? Everything's under control, Mrs. Rivera, but thank you, I assured her. My family was just leaving. My mother, always concerned with appearances, forced a smile for the neighbors. Just a little family disagreement, nothing to worry about. Thomas approached Amanda and spoke quietly but firmly. We should go. This isn't right, and you know it. Amanda looked torn, glancing between her husband and her parents. But Mom and Dad said. They said what they needed to say to get what they wanted, Thomas replied. But it's not true, and deep down I think you know that. My father made one last attempt. If you don't sign over this house, Kyle, you're no longer part of this family. Is that what you want? The threat that might have devastated me years ago now rang hollow. You're asking me to choose between honoring my grandparents' wishes and submitting to your manipulation. That's not a difficult choice. At that moment, another car pulled into the driveway. Uncle Steve stepped out, approaching the gathering on the porch. Jim, Susan, what the hell is going on here? He demanded. I've been hearing some disturbing things. My father looked startled. Steve, what are you doing here? Making sure my brother isn't making a terrible mistake, Uncle Steve replied. Kyle told me about your failed attempt to contest the will. Why would you try to take his house now? The arrival of my uncle shifted the dynamic completely. My father, caught in his deception by his own brother, began to backpedal. We were just trying to help Amanda, he muttered. By stealing Kyle's house, Uncle Steve shook his head in disappointment. That's not helping. That's theft. Thomas gently took Amanda's arm. Let's go home and talk about this privately, he suggested. She nodded, finally seeing the situation clearly. My mother, realizing their plan had completely unraveled, attempted one final manipulation. Kyle, if you ever loved your sister, you'll reconsider. I do love Amanda, I replied sincerely, and I want her to have a wonderful life with Thomas and their baby, but that doesn't require me to give up my home. The moving truck drivers, who had been watching the scene unfold with obvious discomfort, approached Thomas. So we're not moving anything today? No, Thomas confirmed. There's been a misunderstanding. I apologize for wasting your time. As the moving truck pulled away, my parents found themselves isolated, their scheme exposed not just to me but to Amanda, Thomas, Uncle Steve, and the watching neighbors. This isn't over, my father muttered as they retreated to their car. Actually, it is, Brian called after them. Any further attempts to access this property without permission will result in immediate legal action. That's not a threat, it's a promise. As their car drove away, Amanda lingered for a moment. Kyle, I didn't know about them contesting the will or trying to enter your house without permission. I believed them when they said Grandma and Grandpa wanted me to have the house. I know, I said, softening my tone. They've been playing favorites for so long it probably seemed natural to you. We'll find our own place, Thomas assured me, his arm around Amanda's shoulders. The right way. After they left, Uncle Steve stayed behind to apologize. Your father has always had a problem with entitlement, he sighed. I should have seen this coming. The confrontation was over, and my home remained mine. But as I thanked everyone for their support and closed the door, I knew the family relationships would never be the same. In the weeks following the confrontation, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions, relief that my home was secure, vindication that the truth had prevailed, but also a profound sense of loss for the family relationships that had been irreparably damaged. On Brian's advice, I took several legal precautions. We filed a restraining order against my parents prohibiting them from coming within 100 feet of my property. I sent formal trespassing warnings and changed my emergency contacts at work and on medical forms. The house that had been my sanctuary now felt different. Each room carried memories not just of my grandparents, but also of the betrayal that had occurred within its walls. To reclaim my space, I accelerated my renovation plans, repainting rooms and rearranging furniture to create new positive associations. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Amanda texted asking if we could talk. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. She looked different, somehow less entitled and more thoughtful. I wanted to apologize, she began. I should have questioned Mom and Dad's story instead of just believing everything they told me. They've been conditioning you to expect preferential treatment your entire life. I pointed out, not unkindly. It probably seemed perfectly reasonable that Grandpa and Grandma would leave you the house, despite their close relationship with me. Amanda nodded slowly. Thomas helped me see how manipulative they've been, not just with this, but with everything. They've been telling me what to think and how to feel my whole life, and I just went along with it. She explained that she and Thomas had found a starter home in a nice neighborhood, one they could afford with their combined incomes. Mom and Dad offered to help with the down payment, but we declined. We need to do this on our own. This surprised me. Amanda had never refused financial help from our parents before. That's a big step, I acknowledged. I'm proud of you. Thomas and I have been talking a lot about what kind of parents we want to be. She continued, resting a hand on her slightly rounded stomach. We don't want our child to experience the favoritism and manipulation that shaped our childhoods. We want to be better than that. I found myself cautiously optimistic about building a new, healthier relationship with my sister. We agreed to take things slowly, establishing clear boundaries while working toward understanding and forgiveness. My relationship with my parents was a different story. They had made no attempt to apologize or acknowledge their wrongdoing. Through family grapevine, I heard they were telling relatives I had overreacted and misunderstood their intentions. Some believed them, but many now saw through the facade, especially after Uncle Steve shared what he had witnessed. Surprisingly, it was Thomas who became an unexpected ally and friend. He reached out regularly, sometimes seeking advice about preparing for the baby, other times just checking in. We discovered shared interests in hiking and craft beer, leading to occasional weekend outings that helped us both process the family drama. Your parents haven't spoken to me in weeks, he confided during one such hike. They blame me for turning Amanda against them because we refused their financial help. That sounds familiar, I said with a dry laugh. Anyone who challenges their control becomes the enemy. As winter turned to spring, I decided to host a small gathering for Easter. Nothing elaborate, just a casual brunch for friends and the family members who had supported me. Uncle Steve and his wife came, as did Amanda and Thomas, along with Michael, Stephanie, and Brian. The house that had almost been taken from me became a place of new connections and chosen family. As we sat around the table my grandfather had built, I realized that while blood might connect us to some people, it's shared values and mutual respect that create true family bonds. My therapist, Dr. Marshall, helped me process the complex grief of losing my parents while they were still alive. It's a unique kind of loss, she explained. You're mourning the relationship you wished you had, not just the one you lost. Through our sessions, I came to understand that my parents' behavior reflected their own insecurities and limitations, not my worth as their son. This realization didn't excuse their actions, but helped me release some of the pain and resentment I'd carried. By summer, the renovation of my house was complete. Every room reflected my taste and values, honoring my grandparents' legacy while creating something new. The basement office where I worked remotely became a productive space filled with family photos, not of my parents but of my grandparents and the new connections I was building. In a gesture that would have made my grandparents proud, I began volunteering with a local mentorship program for teens without strong family support. Many of these kids reminded me of myself at that age, looking for guidance and affirmation their parents couldn't provide. "You're good with your hands," I told one 14-year-old boy as we built a community garden bench together, echoing my grandfather's words to me. That's a gift not everyone has. The look of pride on his face mirrored what I must have shown when Grandpa Frank praised my early efforts at carpentry. Amanda gave birth to a healthy baby boy in October. They named him Frank, after our grandfather. When she called to invite me to meet my nephew, I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't expected. Holding little Frank with his tiny fingers and curious eyes, I made a silent promise to be the kind of uncle my grandparents had been to me, consistent, supportive, and always there when needed. "He has Grandpa's eyes," Amanda said softly, watching us. "And hopefully, his integrity," I added. She nodded, understanding the subtle reference to all we had learned and lost. "Thomas and I are determined to break the cycle," she assured me. "Frank will grow up knowing he's loved for who he is, not what he does for us." As the year drew to a close, I reflected on how much had changed. The house that had almost been stolen from me had become more than just a property. It was the foundation for a new beginning built on honesty, boundaries, and chosen connections. The painful lessons of the past year had taught me that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's built through the deliberate choice to honor what's right, even when it's difficult. My grandparents had known this all along, which is why they entrusted their home to me, not just as a physical structure, but as an embodiment of their values. Looking around at the house that now truly felt like mine, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for my grandparents' wisdom, for friends who stood by me when it mattered, for the strength I found within myself when tested, and even in a way for the crisis that forced me to define what family really means. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed boundaries or tried to take advantage of you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Remember that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that help us grow the most. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect what's rightfully theirs. Thanks for listening, and remember, the family we choose is sometimes more important than the family we're born into.